When I first discovered the comprehensible input/immersion community a couple of years ago, my first thought was like, of course, I wouldn't have learned English to this level had it not been for music, which doesn't necessarily mean that music was my only or even my main resource for learning English, but it definitely has played a huge role. And then I found out that thinking that music is useless is actually a pretty common opinion in that community. So today I'm not going to be trying to persuade anyone because I am a strong believer in doing things that you enjoy, but I do want to talk about all the ways music has been helpful to me, and maybe that will give you some ideas on what you can do to use music to help you learn languages. Later in the video, I will also show you how I personally study languages through music, and with that being said, let's get started. One of the most basic ways in which my love for music has been helpful to me is improving reading speed, which I usually achieve by doing actual or pretend karaoke, especially with languages that have a different alphabet. For me, that has been Korean and Greek, but I've also found it useful to an extent even with Japanese. I do have to say, however, that I've never had experience with tonal languages, and I think I have read somewhere that in Mandarin Chinese, when they sing, they kind of ignore the tones altogether. So I would say adjust this to your situation and to whatever language it is that you're learning, but this just has been my experience. I remember in Korea, when I was doing my Korean language course, I had a friend who was incredibly fast when it comes to reading. And her secret was that she was really into K-pop, and so she would practice singing and rapping all the time. And you could really tell every time the teacher would ask her to read something that she was way ahead of all of us, just because of all the practice that she had had. However, here I do want to specify that I'm not really talking about reading and understanding the meaning of what you read. I'm talking specifically about looking at a word and knowing how to pronounce it. I also found that to me personally, music has been really helpful when it comes to remembering things. And that is true not just for like single words here and there, but also for whole chunks, be it certain phrases or even grammar structures. Because I feel like if you listen to music, especially if you listen to pop music, you are going to hear the same structures or the same phrases used again and again. Another thing that music can be really helpful with is helping you memorize certain grammar patterns. But here, I think it's really important to differentiate learning grammar from music and using music to help you remember grammar that you've learned elsewhere. Because I do agree, music is not always the most reliable source when it comes to learning grammatical structures and patterns. What I recommend doing, if you haven't tried that yet, is taking a grammar pattern that you want to remember and then trying to find music that has that grammar pattern. So for example, when I was in Spain doing my Spanish course and we just started learning subjuntivo, one song that teachers recommended to us was the super popular song called Resistiré, just because it has so many verbs that are in subjuntivo. But you can probably find a song to illustrate any grammar point. Next time I need to remember a certain conditional in Spanish, instead of thinking of the rule, I can just think of that Cheyenne song that I like and then kind of induce the rule from there. And then finally, another thing when it comes to remembering new information is this almost built-in spaced repetition aspect that music has. I think I've talked about it already, but there's nothing in the world that can make me go back to my notes and revise them. Not because I think it's bad, but because I just cannot make myself do it personally, and I don't even take notes anymore because, again, there's just no point. I will never go back to them. But music is the only exception for me. I think I've shown you guys my little Italian notebooks where I've been dissecting some lyrics of the songs that I like. And the reason why I do that when I don't really do the same thing for texts, I don't really do the same thing for podcasts, movies, whatever, is because if I like a song and I only do it with songs that I like, I will literally have it on repeat for months, if not years. Once I've listened to a podcast episode or watched an episode of a show, I cannot go back to it. But I feel like music is the only exception, because you never listen to one song and think to yourself, wow, that song was beautiful, but I never want to listen to it again. So overall, I think music is great for that low effort practice, because even on days when I don't really feel like studying, I still might turn on my favorite playlist and sing along to a song or two. So now let's talk a little bit about how efficient studying with music is. And I feel like a lot of the times when people talk about efficiency, they talk strictly about study methods. But I believe that not everything that helps our language learning has to do with study methods or even with discipline or consistency. Even though those are definitely important, I'm not going to argue with that. But I think a huge part of our language learning is one, motivation, and two, curiosity. And at least for me, I find that if I don't have those, no amount of discipline will help me truly become passionate about a language. So for me, one of the biggest benefits that music has given to me has been motivation. Let me give you two examples. I first started learning Italian back in, I want to say, the summer of 2020, and I actually started it because at that time I was listening to a lot of Italian music and I kind of was curious what the songs were about. And honestly, I gave up almost as soon as I started. And then I didn't touch it for almost 2 years until one day I realized that I keep listening to Italian music. I keep discovering new songs and artists, but I'm not learning Italian and I'm not able to understand what the songs are about. And as someone who really appreciates lyrics, I really wanted to understand them. And so I went back to Italian in the summer of 2022, and I've made quite a lot of progress with it so far, to the point where I understand most of the music I listen to, and I can also read novels in Italian. And I don't really think that would have happened had it not been for my love for Italian music. But I think where music has truly helped me the most was learning English. I have learned so many words like treacherous, idioms like put a ring on it, proverbs like what goes around comes around, and some cultural references like what a Dear John letter is, all while listening to my favorite artists. But what I truly appreciate the most is that music kind of became my stepping stone to discovering and consuming so much content in English, and that content eventually helped me become fluent. And that's because once I started liking a certain artist or a band, I wanted to know all about them. So I would read their biographies on Wikipedia, I'd visit news websites to follow news about them, I'd watch their interviews, I sometimes would connect with other fans from different countries, I would also translate news and updates for Russian fans. And all of that has contributed to my English being the way that it is right now. And then take Korean, for example. I studied it for many years. I lived in Korea for 3 years. And I watched my friends who were obsessed with K-pop make so much progress while I was struggling to find media, including music, to like, and therefore to find motivation to do anything beyond classes. And yes, I might have improved because of other types of content I was consuming, but it was almost always music that would spark this curiosity for other things. And I just had to follow that, and then unintentionally I would improve my English by doing that. So even if you're not learning from the lyrics themselves, I personally think there's still lots of ways in which listening to music in your target language can be helpful. One of the things that some people seem to hold against learning with music is that quite often lyrics are different from how people talk in real life. And sometimes there's even grammatical mistakes, so there's always a chance that you will learn something that is actually incorrect. I feel like there's two statements, let's address them both. The first statement, music is not how people talk in real life. I would agree with that, but I also think that newspaper headlines is not how people talk in real life. Novels is not how people talk in real life. Even like movies and shows are not exactly how people talk in real life. I am watching a show in Greek right now, and it's almost as if every other sentence they say is like words of wisdom. And I really doubt that that's how Greeks speak in real life. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's different styles and there's different registers of speech. And unless your only goal is conversational fluency, you have to be exposed to all of them. But I guess my biggest grievance is with people who think that A, making mistakes is something terrible, and then B, that once you've learned something that is incorrect, you cannot unlearn it, or at least that it will be super difficult for you to unlearn it. Again, I just think that it's kind of unrealistic to expect that you at some point can learn one version of a language, one correct version of the language, and then kind of just use it for the rest of your life and be okay with it. Even if you learn like what is correct right now, languages evolve, languages change, new words get introduced, other words get sort of cancelled, there's new terminology, there's inclusive language. That's how languages work. I also feel like we often talk about learning things that are incorrect as if we will never be able to get used to the right way of saying things. Even in my native language, there are words that I had mispronounced until I was like in my 20s. And then later, when I learned that it was a mistake, I made an effort to correct it, and now I don't talk like that anymore. And also neuroplasticity is an actual thing, so maybe we don't even have to worry about, learning things incorrectly. In general, I think that as language learners, we always have to be critical of whatever information we receive from whatever source and be ready to potentially dismiss what we have learned. Okay, so now let me tell you how I actually do it. I do, however, have to say that this is not the only way to benefit from listening to music in your target languages. If anything, most of the benefits that I've gotten were kind of passive in the sense that I would just listen to music, looking at the lyrics, trying to follow them. But sometimes when I'm in the mood, I will take a song that I like and I will try to dissect it. So what do I use for that? First of all, the lyrics of the song. The second thing that I usually use is a translation. There's a website called lyricstranslate.com. I will usually use that or just Google. And another thing I use is this browser extension called Definer that lets you translate phrases or sentences or just look up single words and their definitions. So the first step for me is usually listening to the song while following the lyrics. Here, the main thing I try to pay attention to is pronunciation. Is there anything interesting? Are there things that are not pronounced how I would personally pronounce them? I just underline them to later look them up. I don't look them up just yet. The second step is to listen to the song again while following the lyrics and underline words and phrases I do not know. And then the third step is where I will actually look up words and I will write down grammar. So again, instead of just trying to translate separate words, I try to either use Definer to translate whole phrases, or I just use Lyrics Translate to see how certain lines can be translated into English or any other language that I speak. And then what I do is I either write the translation above, or sometimes I will on purpose write the explanation of certain grammar or vocabulary below the lyrics, just so that whenever I look at the lyrics and I read them, I don't see the translation right away and I have some sort of time to be able to recall it by myself. And then if not, I can refer to my notes. If I still have questions, let's say I found this word and I found its definition, but somehow the definition doesn't really match the context, what sometimes I will do is I will go on High Native and I will ask native speakers to help me understand what a certain lyric means. Again, even if you are asking about a phrase that just has a couple of words in it, I feel like it's always best to provide context. So maybe just screenshot the lyrics or insert them in your message so that the person who is responding to you knows the context better and can give you a better answer. And then after that, I basically just vibe by looking at the lyrics and listening to the song a couple more times to make sure I understand and that the pronunciation is clear. Again, I wouldn't be able to do this with a podcast because I would just get tired of listening to the same thing over and over again. But if it's a song that I like, I really do not mind it. After that, I just make sure to listen to the song from time to time, trying to recall the meaning of each line. And what I did specifically for Italian is make a playlist with all of the songs that I have already dissected this way, so that I sometimes can go and just listen to the songs that I 100% understand because I've done the work already. And then the final step is just using words and phrases that you have learned in everyday life. So yes, this is how I approach the matter if I want to be really thorough when it comes to understanding what my favorite music is about. But I would also love to hear your opinions. Are you someone who likes to learn new things from music? Is music a big motivator for you when it comes to learning languages? And if so, how do you approach it? And also in the description, I will leave the links to some of my playlists for the languages that I'm learning, like Italian, Spanish, maybe Greek, definitely Korean. So you can check them out if you want. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye bye!